The Worship of Dionysus. Welcome back to another episode of Wild Feminine Magic. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get into the video. Dionysus is the god of the grape harvest, winemaking, orchards and fruit, vegetation, fertility, ecstasy and theater in ancient Greek religion and myth. He is also known as Bacchus, to the Romans. As Eleutherios, the liberator, his wine, music and ecstatic dance led his followers to discover perfect wisdom about life and the process of awakening from the egoic bondage and the means of liberation from that bondage. His origins are uncertain, but most likely Cretan. His cults took many forms, from Thracian, Greek, and Roman. In Orphic religion, he was a chthonic or underworld aspect of Zeus. The name of Dionysus is found on Mycenaean Linear B tablets and is even linked to the Anatolian goddess 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐿. The cult of Dionysus was strongly associated with satyrs, centaurs, and Silene, and its characteristic symbols were the bull, the serpent, leopards, the ivy, and the wine. Initiates worshipped him in the Dionysian mysteries, which were linked with the Orphic mysteries, and may have influenced Gnosticism. Orpheus was said to have invented the mysteries of Dionysus. Wine was a religious focus in the cult of Dionysus and could ease suffering, bring joy, and inspire divine madness. Festivals of Dionysus included the performance of sacred dramas enacting his myths as a dying and rising god. Dionysus has links to Orphism and to Persephone. Dionysus descends into the underworld and returns very much like Persephone, who annually descends into the underworld for a season and then returns. This myth describes humanity as having a dual nature and a divine spark or soul inherited from Dionysus. In order to achieve salvation from the Titanic, material existence, one had to be initiated into the Dionysian mysteries and undergo 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐿, a ritual purification and reliving of the suffering and death of the god. Orphics believed that they would, after death, spend eternity alongside Orpheus and other heroes. An inscription found on a stone stele found at Delphi circa 340 BC, which describes his travels. From Thebes, where he was born, he first went to Delphi where he displayed his starry body, and with Delphian girls took his place on the folds of Parnassus, then next to Eleusis, where he is called 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐿. The Eleusinian mysteries identify him with 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐿, the son of Persephone. Orphic Dionysus symbolizes the alchemy and rebirth of the soul. In the Orphic tradition, Dionysus was the patron god of the Orphics, who they connected to death and immortality. He symbolized the one who guides the process of transformation and rebirth. Could he have been one of the first figures in the Mediterranean whose cult was a cult of alchemy? It makes sense that the medieval alchemical process is the same as how wine is made. Spiritual alchemy requires a purification of the soul from the bondage of ego. Calcination is the first stage of this process, where we descend into darkness and chaos. We enter the subconscious mind of the hidden and buried, where we break with our worldly attachments, the desire for status, wealth. Here we discover the need to quest towards higher consciousness. As we purify parts of ourselves that no longer serve us, our old belief system ideologies begin to lose their grip. The purpose of the second stage of dissolution is to explore our shadow self. Here we free ourselves from our inauthentic and socially conditioned identity. In chemistry, dissolution refers to the dissolving of solid material and metaphorically, the dissolution of the ego. There is often a catharsis of releasing repressed emotions and past painful experiences. Stage 3 of separation is a very liberating stage where we can free ourselves from negative emotions. By separating ourselves from our inauthentic selves, we can become aware of our true feelings. The separation occurs when we become aware of our own thoughts, feelings, and desires without overly identifying with them or becoming attached to them, and is a kind of detachment from our old skin. In stage 4 of conjunction, we are still drawing together the different strands of our true self. Polarities come together, such as male and female, body and soul, spirit and matter. Harmony is achieved between the different elements of our being. Putrefaction, or fermentation, is the 5th stage and describes the decay of one's old self and the rebirth of one's true self. The first 4 stages involve discarding our old, inauthentic self. At this stage, however, we catch a glimpse of a more refined, authentic self. This stage can be likened to the rebirth of the soul or the wine. While putrefaction is the rotting away of our former selves as the superfluous is let go, putrefaction is the period of losing our identity and old self. Stage 6, the distillation stage, is the stage when all of the impurities are removed, and there is nothing left but the essence. The distillation of one's true self freed from any inferior elements. The final stage is coagulation, which describes the process of solidification where one's essential self becomes whole. Coagulation involves the complete unification of polarities, spirit and matter, body and soul, masculine and feminine, to form a single whole. In this final stage, one's higher self emerges, and it can be likened to the point when the gold cools and solidifies. We find many underworld deities who are associated with grapes, wine, orchards, fruits, pomegranates, vegetation, regeneration, liberation, creativity, alchemy and transformation. These vegetation deities or nature deities disappear and reappear in a life, death and rebirth cycle, and embody the growth cycle of plants. In nature worship, the deity can be a god or goddess with the ability to regenerate itself. Vatica or Vaticanus is the archaic Etruscan name of the goddess associated with birth and the underworld. Her name comes from Sanskrit, Vatica, which means orchard. The Vatican comes from her name as the Vatican was built on top of the Etruscan cemetery and underworld. In Mesopotamia, we have the underworld queen and king, 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞 and 𝐦𝐥𝐤𝐤, equal rulers in the Mesopotamian underworld responsible for the fertility of the land. They share similar themes with the Hades Persephone, Osiris, and Ariadne Dionysus myths. Osiris is the god of fertility, agriculture, the afterlife, the dead, resurrection, life, and vegetation in ancient Egyptian religion. He was a personification of chthonic, underworld, fertility. By about 2400 BCE, however, Osiris clearly played a double role. He was both a god of fertility and the embodiment of the dead and resurrected king. This dual role was in turn combined with the Egyptian concept of divine kingship. The king at death became Osiris, god of the underworld, and the dead king's son, the living king, was identified with Horus, a god of the sky. Osiris was associated with the cycles observed in nature and vegetation. He is linked with the heliacal rising of Orion and Sirius and the annual flooding of the Nile Bright, which brought hope of new life after death to the ancients. Andjety, meaning he of Andjet, is a local ancient Egyptian deity and is considered one of the earliest Egyptian gods, possibly with roots in prehistoric Egypt. A vegetation deity is often a fertility deity. The deity typically undergoes dismemberment, scattering, and reintegration, as narrated in a myth or reenacted by a religious ritual. The cyclical pattern always has themes of immortality, resurrection, and reincarnation. Vegetation myths often resemble creation myths in which parts of a primordial being's body generate aspects of the cosmos. That brings us to the end of today's video all about the worship of Dionysus. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to leave a thumbs up and to subscribe to Wild Feminine Magic for even more fascinating content, just like this. As always, thanks for watching. See you again soon in the next one.